Hey everyone, welcome back to I Heart Movies. My name is Jonathan North, and today I'm joined by Chelsea Robson, and we're going to be following up the episode we did last year when we talked about the 1954 Audrey Hepburn film Sabrina. This time we're going to be looking at the 1995 remake starring Harrison Ford and Julia Ormond. When we recorded the episode on the 1954 Sabrina over a year ago now, I had never seen either version, and ever since then I've thought it would be fun to come back and do the second version, talking about the differences, what they might have changed, and how the time in which it was filmed might have changed the story. So once I started my Every Version Ever podcast, I thought this would be the perfect excuse to have Chelsea back and dive into the remake. So, I guess the first thing, I wanted to do this one because we did the last Sabrina. You chose the earlier Sabrina the first time we did a podcast together. And I guess I wasn't that familiar with it. I didn't really know about the remake. So I thought it'd be fun to do like compare and contrast and talk about the newer version and see if you weren't familiar with it, see how you liked it and how it compared to the old one. So
Okay.
I think you said you had not seen the new one. How does it compare for you?
Yeah, so the last time that we talked, when we were talking about the original, which was from the 1950s, it was, and also the fact you got Audrey Hepburn in there. Billy Wilder was the director. Like, so you have like all these extremely iconic characters and actors of the time that were trying to pull this whole story together. And so I did really like that movie. And looking into it with Harrison Ford, you know, there's a lot of things in this that I feel like they did a good job with adapting to the time. Um, but at the same time, if I were to rank them, I would definitely say the original one is going to be the best because I just don't think that you can outdo Audrey Hepburn. I got to say though that Julia Ormond, they did a good job with finding someone that was very similar to Audrey, but in a modern of 1995 kind of way. So I appreciate all that they did with that. And with Harrison, I don't know how I feel about Harrison in this one. I felt like he did well enough, and I mean, I felt like he did a good job. Um, it was just hard to compare the two, I guess, mostly because in this one you can definitely tell that Harrison was more of the star power
Mm-hmm.
versus Julia. Because Julia is really a bit of an unknown. And what's interesting is they really looked at everyone. Like every major Hollywood actress of the time was in the running, quote unquote, for this movie as I was looking it up. And I just saw that they like literally, if you're watching this on, I was watching this on Amazon and on the X-ray thing where that you can show
Mm-hmm.
all the different, behind the scenes little things. It went through a list and it's like 15 different leading ladies, and it's like every big name that you can think of that they got or they were thinking about getting for this role. And even I went in and tried to look up any interviews after the fact, for like Letterman or Jay Leno, and just behind the scenes, like critic interview type things. And I didn't find any of Julia. I just found them with Harrison and uh, director Sidney Pollack. So I felt that that was an interesting way to go about it,
Mm-hmm.
considering that this is about her. But
Yeah.
I mean, they really focused on his star power to kind of bring the film. Um, in all, I felt like they did a good job at moving it through, but in the end I was like, well, I'd still go with the original better one, mostly for the clothing, I would say. What were your thoughts?
um, I don't know. I ended up watching both of them one right after the other just because I wasn't as familiar as you with the original Sabrina, so I wanted to make sure that it was fresh in my mind when I watched the new one.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like I liked it better this time than when I watched it originally. I don't know why. I, I guess when I watched it originally, I feel like I probably was too hung up on the age gap.
Okay, yeah.
And I guess maybe I didn't care as much this time. I don't know. Maybe it's because I was more familiar with it and it wasn't like a surprise.
Right.
It was a surprise the first time I watched it. Like I wasn't expecting this huge age gap. And I think we talked about it originally, but I don't know how much the age gap was supposed to be within the narrative. It was a big age gap in real life, but I don't think it was supposed to be quite that wide within the story.
Right.
So I think knowing that made it a little better for me this time.
Uh-huh.
And then watching the new one, the age gap is narrower. She's older and he's younger, I believe.
Yeah, I
And
think so.
I really liked all the different ways they modernized it,
Uh-huh.
but I don't know if I could say I like one over the other because I ended up enjoying the first one a lot more on my second watch or my watch this time. So, yeah, I don't know. I like both thing. I like things about both of them. I think they're both really good movies.
Yeah. I mean, here's some of the things that I was like, oh, you're really struggling. Is mostly I was looking at like in general, like clothing of the 90s really just struggled. It was just not a good era. Specifically because it was this time where like women were really like coming into the suit pant, or not even the pantsuit, but like the skirt suit thing, and
Hmm.
no one knew how to dress appropriately. And so you're looking at the one of the major, I think, things that added to the first one was the whimsicalness of that. The fact that first off, everybody knew what Audrey Hepburn looked good in.
Hmm.
And so they were able to, the costume director on that one was able to really enhance her the way that her classically how it fit with her, as opposed to um totally siding for the styles of the day. And so with this one, when they're totally bringing up the Paris garb and high fashion Vogue, and like the whole scenes where she's in Paris and she's like helping at the water fountain, like that one was, I'm just looking at this and I'm like, oh no, why?
I don't know if that was supposed to be funny, but it made me laugh. There was
Oh,
some garish costuming happening there.
it really was. And so, and I'm not even sure how I would do it now, but I definitely would have, because people are going to listen to this and thinking, oh, Chelsea, that's really what you got out of the costumes. I'm like, well, yes, actually, because when you're looking at a type of person, you can really just make them look whimsical and make them look their best. And then you have others that it's like, yeah, you're really just looking toward the time and it ages itself super, like really easily.
Hmm.
Um, so I feel like that's one of the main things that I was like, okay, this needs to, they really could have made her a lot more, I'm guessing like soft, but at the same time not, because um I don't know, there was just certain choices that left me looking at the outfits and not looking at her. And so like you end up losing the audience because of that if you're not done super well. But I actually had a moment because I know that they remade everything and they were thinking, okay, how are we going to remake this with the sensibilities of that era?
Hmm.
And it also made me think, okay, if you were to remake this even today, like what would the differences be? And I think a lot of times people would like jump straight to let's have the role reversal and make Sabrina the huge bazillionaire and have him be the chauffeur's son, I guess, or something like
Hmm.
that. I mean, you would think that they'd probably try to pull that out somewhere, which I'm glad that they don't, because just I don't think it would work personally.
Especially if there was an age gap, because that would make it
Yeah,
feel really weird.
It really would. And as far as like everybody's trying to be all progressive and whatnot with, with storylines these days, but there's a sensibility of like what seems normal and what just seems like trying
Mhm.
too hard. Not necessarily normal, but because there's got to be a people's confidence levels have to be at the same level for it to really be believable.
Mhm.
And like you can get away with it more with having, in the current state with the class differences as far as like really uber rich, richest guy ever versus
Mhm.
like chauffeur's daughter, uh, versus the other way around. You can get away with that more with a guy to the girl in that situation, but you're still like, there's got to be a lot more of a connection if
Mhm.
you were to remake it in any other way. But I'm kind of rambling right now. So,
Well, we could start at the beginning and then go through each scene and talk about different ways they were changed it or things we liked.
sure.
I found it interesting. I should have watched them like side by side to figure it out, but I think the opening narration was almost the same, at least for the first part of it. Did you notice that?
I think it is. I think it
Okay.
was supposed to be that way.
The one thing it does change towards the end when it becomes talks about the more modern things that are happening. But
Right.
the one thing that made me laugh out loud was she said, David did a Gap ad.
Oh, the class. Oh my
The way she
goodness.
was so not excited, but like, oh, it's so amazing.
So reverenced. Oh my gosh, Gap. That's amazing. I felt like, that first opening scene, they basically do the same thing. Like they introduce the characters. They say the opulence on the one hand and her, the one up in the tree, watching and kind of wanting to be there just for David. I think they could have done more with creating more of a connection with them as kids.
Yeah.
Like not actually have them as kids, but like have there have been more of a conversation. I think that would have like brought the age differences together a little
Hmm.
more.
There were a couple references, like talking about being a little girl and him having a music lesson,
Uh-huh.
and another one with Linus, and I don't know how old he was, but she talked about um, something happened and she got shocked, like an electric shock from something, and he stayed with her all day. And the way
Right.
she talked, you could tell he was significantly older, but I still felt like they were talking about like it wasn't maybe 10, 15 year age difference. I don't know exactly how old, but
Yeah.
the way they talked made it feel like there wasn't a huge age difference. Like at most, David was maybe a teenager when she was like 9 or 10.
Yeah. That's kind of how it seemed at least, which is fine. I'm like, all right.
Another random thing that I noticed was I think Sabrina and her dad are supposed to be British. And I think that they did that so that they could keep the accent because like back then they had like that mid-Atlantic accent that was like a fake British accent. And
Yes.
and I think that they made them British so that they could keep that because that was kind of like semi-iconic, I guess. And I just found that interesting that they're like the only British people.
Yeah, I liked that. I felt that was believable because they they got him with the car.
Another random thing that I noticed and I actually really liked, and I feel like this is one way that the new version is better than the old version, is that in the beginning, Sabrina is like purposely homely.
Uh-huh.
Like, not that she's ugly or anything, but like the way she dresses, the way she does her hair, it's kind of like a Princess Diary situation.
Yes.
Like she has
Yes,
the big
exactly.
glasses.
The giant hair.
I really liked that they had her like transform over her trip to Paris. And the one thing that I wrote down but this is probably not fair to all homeschoolers, but I wrote that she dresses like a homeschooler. And I'm homeschooled. I know a lot of homeschoolers, so I feel like they nailed that look. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but just that style of dress, just everything. She seemed like a homeschooler to me, and I don't know if she was, but I don't know. She felt like a homeschooler.
I mean, she probably was, let's be honest. If they're in that area and her dad's an avid reader, so
Mm.
he probably I would assume yes.
That's
That's
a
my
good point.
assumption.
That's a good point.
And hey, I have nothing against homeschoolers. I wish I could have been a homeschooler most of my years. My parents were very lucky if they were able to get me to go to school all the days, and that was never a thing. So I guess my family, like we had our family business, and so I helped out a lot with that growing up. And
Hmm.
also, I just like school was never really my thing, so I often did my own stuff wherever I went. So I can
Hmm.
definitely see how that would have been a thing for her dad being like, well, I'm just gonna have you read as much as I do.
Yeah, there were a lot of books in their house. I didn't notice it at first, but then she pointed it out in one scene. I was like, yeah, there are a lot of books there.
That's a lot of books, yeah. I did have a moment where I was like trying to see all of the titles to the different books. I was like, that's an interesting array.
I do that too whenever like a movie or TV shows like a shelf full of books or DVDs or whatever. I see if there's anything I recognize.
Yeah.
Another random difference that I noticed was there was only the mother, Larrabee, and she was the
Yes.
one in the business. Like whenever she was married, he married into the family. So she was the one behind all the business.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, there was just one line about the dad marrying her. Not like he married her for her money, but like he married into
I
this
mean, probably did,
wealthy
and I wouldn't.
family.
I'm like, okay. I mean, that isn't. I can definitely see how. I mean, Linus and Maud had a really good relationship back and forth as far as being. You could tell, as he said, he's like, "Well, I learned everything from you."
Hmm. Hmm.
So definitely shows that she was more of the business type, business mogul.
Yeah. And one other huge difference from the original. I don't know if this is a good difference or a bad difference, depends on who you are. There was no suicide attempt.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I was like, I'm like sitting there waiting for it. I was like, there's no suicide? Oh, all right.
Yeah. She has like a moment with him before she leaves for Paris, but there's no suicide. She's going to basically say goodbye to David, and this is while he's off with a girl. And she
Right.
thinks he's in the other room, and she's talking about him not knowing who she is, but she wanted to leave, and she wants him to know that someone is thinking about her. And then Linus steps out, and she runs away.
I mean, can you blame her?
No.
I would definitely be running away at that point. I'm like, "Bleh."
Yeah.
Oh, I do appreciate Greg Kinnear as David. I felt like he on the one hand it was he's got a good vibe to him that looks like a guy that would be on the North Shore, but also he's good at playing the little bit of a flighty fellow of just like, yeah, all right.
Hmm.
Whatever. I appreciated his turnaround at the end
Hmm.
where the mom's all like, what in the world has happened to you? And she's like,
Yeah.
you have been copying me on all of the business dealings for the last 17 years. You just assumed I couldn't read.
Yeah, I think I liked his character better in this than in the old one. I think they went to greater lengths to make him a better person, I think. Like
Uh-huh.
everything he does seems more like he has a better reason than in the old one, like falling for Sabrina, etc. Like in the old one, he's just kind of a playboy. And I mean,
Yeah.
he sort of is here too, but he's a little bit more, I don't know, moral about it. It's not like he's actively trying to cheat on his fiance. He has
Right.
like actual reasons.
Yeah, I think they did a better job at, or at least I feel like he did a better job at recognizing showing that he recognized the change in his brother, even in little moments where he's like, okay, wait, no, that does not mean that. Like you got it for her.
So the other big difference from the beginning is her reason for going to Paris. So in the original, she went to go to cooking school, and I don't think she was going to school here. I think she just had a job, and I think she was working for Vogue, was it?
Yes.
Okay, she was like a photo assistant for a photographer.
I don't know what her job was, but yeah, I mean, she was mostly like just an assistant, like the person who does all the
Yeah,
grunt work.
yeah. I don't know. I couldn't quite tell because there was a lot of French happening, so I don't know how much of her was being shuffled off to other people because she started with one person and she ended up working for this other photographer and she ended up kind of having a relationship with this photographer too,
Right.
but she was still hung up on David. And this whole thing, she spends a lot of time in France and I kind of appreciated that because you get more of her growing as a person rather than just a few scenes of her at school and then she's totally different when she comes back.
Yeah.
And that's not just her look, because like I said, she does transform by her look a lot too. But you can see that she's trying to get over David because she has this picture that she's hanging on the wall and she's like slowly covering it up with all this other stuff. But she never covers up the face, I don't think. So she's not completely over him.
She never covers up his eyes.
Yeah.
So he's always staring at her. Another thing I felt like this one, and I think both of them really, I don't think they did a really great job of showing her transition of liking uh Lionel versus David. I feel like they could have made that different in a way, like a little bit more recognition that we actually both like each other. I don't know. Everything about Lionel is hard for me. His whole character. And I can see it as I'm watching with Harrison Ford that he does do, he is seduced. He's more seduced by the feelings of like trying to seduce and being like, oh, this is an actual thing versus I think her.
hmm
And that's one thing that I felt like they could have added a lot more as like them as kids, just like
Yeah.
if they would have had more of a conversation of him being like, "Oh, well, you were always this," or something like that, and then having this like crossing the Rubicon, I'll be like, "Oh, that's the moment where everything shifted." And you don't really get that as well for both of them at the same time. I think, because she's at the point where when she comes back in this one, not with Audrey Hepburn, but with this one, when she comes back in and she's like, basically, I want to never see you again. Oh, wait, what, tell me what else? Maybe I do want to see you again.
hmm
I feel like during that time, it was hard to see the actual shift for her to be like, oh no, I'm totally into you. It was more because, at the very end, she's just like, oh, you want me to go? Okay. It was believable to an extent, but I feel like if it were me, I would want a little bit more.
Yeah, I get that. There was room for improvement.
Yeah.
One other thing that through this whole scene, you kind of get little glimpses of the staff. Like in the original, we had that core group of like 4 staff members. I think there were a
Yes.
couple more in this one,
Uh-huh.
but I don't feel like we got to know too many of them except for one named Rosa and one named Joanna.
Yeah.
And Joanna, you kind of get the sense that she has a thing for the dad and vice versa.
Yes.
But I really liked Rosa.
I really liked Rosa.
She had this one line that I don't remember the exact thing. I wrote down like the gist of what she said. She's talking about like when she first came to this country, she was miserable and she asked God why, and she didn't get any answers, so she stopped crying. It took 11 years.
So she's just telling, hey, just so you know, it'll take 11 years for her to get over herself.
Yeah, like
Oh,
trying to cheer him up, but saying it'll take 11 years.
yeah.
I just laughed.
They had really good moments, and I liked how they shifted because in the first one you have these, the funny moments is between the dad and Linus
Mm-hmm.
as far as like their business and like, you know, getting everybody to jump on the glass and the plastic. And now in this one, he's like trying to get all of them to try to destroy the TV. It's just like,
Yeah.
I appreciated that they still kept that humor, that
Uh-huh.
levity in those moments, and just showing how he really isn't the man of the party. He's all about, hey guys, okay, this is my chance. Get everybody in here. Here, take a whack at it. You'll love it.
That one scene with the TV, it looked like the one guy wasn't trying that hard to hit it, like he was
Right.
afraid of actually breaking it.
Right.
Another thing that happens during all of this, her time in Paris, is you get more scenes back with Linus and David, and you kind of get to know his fiance a little bit more, not
Yeah.
too much, but a little bit. So you kind of get to know who she is. And this time she's a doctor. And I found it kind of interesting that she's the one who proposed to him, but she kind of made it seem like he proposed to her, the way she kind of turned it around on him.
Oh, that's a smart girl right there. That's a smart girl.
What did you think of the fiance and also her parents?
As far as casting or character
Characters
development?
and just the general vibe of the characters.
Yeah, you were right for sure that they definitely went in and added a little bit more substance to her, and also more substance to their relationship. You can definitely see that this was a long relationship, like
Mm-hmm.
at least a year, at least, because
Yeah.
you know, David ends up saying, "Oh, I haven't seen you," or talking to Sabrina, "I haven't seen you in years." So, okay, it's pretty far along in the story that you've been with her. So, I assume that it's been a long time since
Mm-hmm.
you guys have been together. And in that way, it makes it a lot more believable, one, that he would jump in so quickly to that idea, because at that point in time, it's like, well, yeah. But also, I did appreciate that they made her, there's no reason why it would have moved forward in this day and age. Or when I say this day and age, I'm not meaning 2020, I'm meaning 1999.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that day and age, how it would have, especially during this time, you're looking at a lot of women they're coming up more and more into the workforce, and less and of a difference in quote unquote roles. And
Mm-hmm.
so with him, he's always been the last person to be fixed on his plans. And she's obviously been one of the first people in her group of friends, probably, to be fixed on a specific destination, considering that she's a resident doctor and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
very determined girl. So I like that they gave her that side and made it a lot more, or at least made it very believable in that day and age that they would be getting married.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because if you look at the first one, it kind of feels like he's being pushed into the relationship more than in this one.
Yeah, she just seems kind of like a flake in the old one.
Yeah.
So, what did you think of her parents in this one?
Oh, geez. That first dinner, man. That was something. I mean, it's weird, the dynamics that they threw into this, because they obviously make the age difference between the mom and the dad is a lot
Didn't even
more.
think of that. How did I miss that? You're right.
The age difference of that one is like, oh wow. So basically and then there's a point where at dinner, like, somebody's mentioning something like, oh, do you want something today or whatever, and she's like, like, he clearly spoke Spanish to this girl. And she's responding in French, and I'm like, oh gosh. She's like, well, I was a stewardess. Oh, they now call them flight attendants. Well, and then she goes into this lewd joke right after. It's like, oh my goodness gracious. How awkward would that be?
The one quote, whenever they try to be funny, it comes off as perverse or
Yes.
terrifying. You'll get used to it.
I wonder if she's the first wife or not. That's one thing that they didn't really make clear.
I don't know.
Just funny. I did enjoy the back and forth of the whole thing, though.
Yeah, I thought they were funny. in a weird way.
Yeah.
There was another scene. I wrote down another quote from Rosa. I think they were writing back and forth, and this is when Sabrina is told about the engagement. And there was a quote from Rosa: "Darling Sabrina, life is a dream, and now it's over."
Ah, oh, good times.
I liked her.
Oh, good times. I like the fact, and remind me, did Sabrina's dad end up super rich as well?
Yeah, sort of. I don't know how the money would translate, but at the end, he talked about listening in on conversations between the Larrabee family and trading stocks whenever they traded stocks.
Right.
So he ended up with just over $2 million, I believe.
Yeah, so that was in this one, the 95 version. I was just wondering if that was the same in the 54 version.
I don't think so. I don't remember that happening.
Yeah, I did like the fact that they gave him a a love interest. I don't think that
Yeah,
they did that with the other one.
I thought they were kind of cute together.
Yeah. So how did you think everything kind of wrapped together? How they transitioned from one decade, one, era to another?
I thought they did well, especially like I mentioned with the clothes. I thought they did a good job of making you know that time was passing, because with the older one, aside from the way Sabrina acted, nothing felt too different from before she went to Paris and then when she came home.
Yeah.
But I thought they made the transition feel more believable and show
Yeah.
more time passing.
I'm glad that they gave her a little love affair in this one,
Hmm.
cuz that makes a lot more sense as far as just growth,
Yeah,
human growth. You learn a lot in relationships, and for her to have actually moved even a little bit on
yeah.
from David, you kind of would need a little bit more of a broadening of your spectrum.
Hmm. She didn't move on 100% though, because there was that line about him. He could tell that she was thinking of someone else or something. And then
Right.
I don't think you see him again. So I think it's just implied that they must have broken up off screen.
Yeah. Because the next person that you see her with is that other her mentor woman.
Yeah. And I like that she had someone like that to talk to as well.
Yeah.
Just more indications of growing as a person.
Yeah, more people involved.
Because it really seemed, in the older one, it really seemed very quick between moving away and coming back.
Yeah.
So at the point that she does come back, there's, like in the older one, there's this party that he invites her to when he finds her. And I'm not sure, when he did find her, had she taken a bus or something? Because it looked like she was just standing on the side of the road, and she wasn't like near a station or anything. He just happened to
Yeah.
see her.
I think that no, I think yeah, she had gotten off. They had a bus go by, so I think that
Okay.
she had gotten off the bus. I'm not exactly sure why she decided to not get a ride home.
She mentioned in her last letter to her dad that she wanted to surprise him, so he wasn't supposed to come and pick her up.
Yeah, was she just waiting for a taxi or something? I don't know.
Maybe. I don't really know how taxis work. Maybe she was standing where a taxi would come by. I've
You
never
live
been to
in
New York or anything, so
Oh
I've
yeah.
never had to hail a taxi.
Well, have you been able to hail an Uber?
No.
Oh,
I don't
well,
think
there you go.
I don't think we have Ubers near me.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, when he picks her up, he does not recognize her like the original. But part of this is because she's had one more transformation off screen. She's cut her hair. So what did you think of her
Yes.
haircut?
I was expecting her to, or expecting them to cut her hair, and I mean, I'm glad that they did. So here's something you'll learn is that if you know a girl and she was in a relationship and then all of a sudden she just has a complete cut of hair, like total change of hairstyle, it's most likely because he's gone. Because you don't cut your hair for a guy. You cut your hair for you. And so that is I'm pretty sure that is pretty universal if you're looking around. So I do know that they were going to cut her hair. The perm is what bothered me. But then again, like, it is a little bit more of what would have happened in 1995. So once again, it was a sad year, or sad couple years for fashion and for hairstyles in general. So I'll give them a pass. But I mean, you're looking at the same, Audrey Hepburn cut her in the movie, cut her hair that way as well. So this is a significant way for a woman to show she's changed.
That makes sense. I just figured you might have something to say about the style because of I felt like it really dated it to the 90s.
Yeah. No, for sure. Any short hairstyle is hard to do, as far as not to be dated, because generally long hair is the more classic. It's harder to date that one just because it takes so long to get to that point where your hair is that long. But short hair, you have to change every 6 weeks or so. So in order to keep it short. So there's definitely going to be changes in hairstyles, and that's easier to keep with a trend. So, I mean, I give it to him. I don't know exactly what they would have done. I'd have to do a Google search of like what back in 95, let's see. You would probably have a little bit more of it's going to be something like that, but it's also going to be the short hair of it flipping out a little bit more. It turns it, but that's more like closer to the 2000 era, I would say, because you don't really have Friends on the market just yet. And so, the Rachel haircut isn't particularly there yet, but it's coming. It's right around the corner. So
I never really thought about that being as like short hair being a more easy way to identify a time period, but I think you're right. I never thought about it before, but most of the time period identifying haircuts are pretty short.
Yeah. I mean, they don't have to be like short like that one, but definitely under shoulder length. Because the moment you go past shoulder length, it's really hard to have a style other than curly or big curls versus
I was going to say that's
curls.
the other way you date a hairstyle is how big the hair is, like how much product they're putting into it.
For sure. Oh, I was right there. Don't worry about it. I mean, granted, I was really young, so at that point, my mom did get me into the perm era of that time, and I wasn't particularly I don't remember being a fan or not. It just that's what it was. So.
I don't think I ever had a hairstyle or a haircut that could date me. Mom did mostly buzz cuts, like not completely buzzed, like she did some, like if we wanted it. But I remember really wanting a bowl cut because I saw it on TV, but she would never do it. Mom cut all her hair, but she would never give me a bowl cut. And looking back, I'm glad.
Good job, Mom. Good job.
So we have a party that they go to after the revelation that she is Sabrina. And the party, I don't remember what the party was for in the original film, but this time it's for his mother's birthday. And this is another change from the original movie. They have his fiance is not in attendance at all, because in the original one, I think he got rid of her by spilling a drink on her and then going after Sabrina.
Right.
But this time, they don't even bother with that. She's just not at the party at all. But the thing that this made me laugh so hard. As an apology for missing her birthday party, his fiance sent her a dog.
And her mom hates it. His mom is like, a dog.
And I think her parents are there, and they say something like, "We're so sorry Elizabeth couldn't be here." And she says, "So am I. She gave me a dog." I burst out laughing. I laughed so hard I annoyed the cat who was on my lap. He was looking at me like, "What on earth is wrong with you?"
Oh, that's funny.
Just her delivery. So am I. She gave me a dog.
She gave me a dog.
And here's another thing that you might have something to say about. What did you think of the mom's dress?
Oh goodness. I mean, once again, you're really tied to the styles of the time. Not a fan. Not a fan.
I didn't make too many notes on wardrobe, but I wrote something down about that because she had a giant bow on her back.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It was
Oh, the 90s, yes.
everybody always talks about, you know who JoJo Siwa is? She's like a teen star. She always wears big giant bows in her hair. Like
Okay.
the giant bow on this dress would put JoJo Siwa to shame.
Well, okay.
Enormous.
What were you thinking as far as his wardrobe selections?
Linus?
Yes.
I didn't really have any specific thoughts. It's just a lot of suits.
Yeah.
They seem kind of normal.
Yeah. There were a couple things that I'm like, I'm not really a fan of the bow tie on him. Some guys really are able to pull it off, but I think you have to have a longer torso. And I was like, you probably would have done better with an actual tie. But I felt like they did. I mean, that's the other thing about with men's fashion is like it's not that different.
Mm-hmm.
Women
it's
have
harder to date.
All across the spectrum, but for men it's like a suit. Okay, slight differences, I'm sure, but yeah.
Another difference in this version is that instead of a tennis court, the location of choice is a solarium. I just thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know why they chose to change that, but I liked the location. It made it more interesting to look at.
It's a little easier to, sneak away into.
That's true. Places to hide.
Uh-huh. And David would know all the places to hide.
I found it interesting that with Elizabeth gone, they kind of used her parents as the people who are getting suspicious about Sabrina.
Yeah.
Because they have them watching from a distance and they're like, who was that? And getting the mom all flustered and trying to make excuses.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure the dad has heard stories about David. And so I do not doubt that, especially when you're connecting this to my business. And the reason why I'm doing this is mostly because of the fact that we're quote unquote almost family now. So I'm sure that he's like, hey, I got people. I got better options too. So he's not just doing it for his daughter, but I would say a lot of it is doing it for his daughter.
I think they have reason to be suspicious. One thing that I liked was in the scene where they confront David, like he's trying to sneak away. He's got the champagne glasses in his back pockets like the original. The mom, I wrote down her whole quote because it made me laugh. She says, I endured 21 hours of hard labor to bring you into this world. The doctors begged me to take drugs, but I said no, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't hurt my child. Well, I changed my mind. You do anything to screw up this thing with Elizabeth, and I swear I'll kill you.
Good mom. Good mom.
But yeah, they kept the sitting on the glass thing in this one. I don't think they played it, the glass itself, too much for laughs as they did in the original one. Because I felt like they kind of went on a little bit too long with that, like Linus hitting his rear end and him falling on it and getting poked. And I mean, yeah, it's funny, but my thing was when I was watching, I was like, he has stitches. You might break the stitches. And they didn't do that. They played up the humor more later on when he was given a whole bunch of sedatives.
Right. Yeah, I liked that part. I was like, he doesn't like pain, so give him this and this. And he's like, no, they haven't proven that. It's like, obviously, this is something that I killed his dad. No, they haven't proven it.
Yeah.
Oh, no, he's not gonna sue his own mother. Well, he's not me, okay?
So what did you think of the whole scene with Linus trying to take his place in the solarium?
It's hard. It's really hard because it's like, how would I feel if I were in that situation and be like, whoa, this is something else. Um,
Hmm.
I feel like that was another, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It was awkward, and I think she did a good job of notifying, no, that's awkward. What are you doing? But
Hmm.
still enough that it was like, well, okay, I guess. Because I mean, I know you too. It doesn't have nearly the same, it's all in the family.
Yeah.
He did
It
that,
was
but
it was
not as
awkward, but
much.
they didn't repeat that line. That line got kind of weird in the older version, for me anyway.
Yeah, I
Said that it's
agree.
all in the family.
I agree.
But they did end that though with her slapping him, which I guess he kind of had coming because he did kiss her without. Uh, I don't know exactly. I don't remember exactly how it went down, but I just think he kind of leaned in and kissed her, and she wasn't expecting that, so it made sense. But I didn't know, like, I don't know how close they were before this, so it seemed odd that she forgave him that easily, especially since it ended with her slapping him. Because the
Yeah.
next day, he asked, I think it's the next day, he asked her to go with him to photograph this cottage. I think he said it was in Martha's Vineyard that he's planning
Uh-huh.
to sell. And she just goes with him.
I think that there was enough knowledge of each other there, because I mean, even when she first got back, he recognizes her first, like, right
Yeah,
away, and it's
that's
like,
true.
oh, hey, Sabrina. How
Yeah.
was your trip? And it's like he doesn't just recognize her; he recognizes her enough to even like, no, I know you were on a trip, and oh yeah, hi. As far as David doesn't recognize anything at all, and is like,
Hmm.
okay. Um, so I feel like they do have enough of a at least knowledge of each other and less fear. Well, she does mention that when she was younger, she always had this fear, and her dad was like, "Well, I mean, that was probably normal because of
Hmm.
one, who he is, and two, he's just older when you're like 8 years old." So,
Hmm.
um, but at the same time, yeah, for him to just kind of lean in like that without her expecting any of it, and being on the defensive for sure, feeling like, hey, now you're trying to get rid of me with $1 million deal.
So, what did you think about all the stuff that happened the next day then with the helicopter ride and then the private jet and then photos and basically a day long date, even though that's not how they framed it?
Right. Uh the marathon dates. Let's see. I think at that point in time, once you have decided, okay, I'm going with you, you let your guard down quite a bit
Hmm.
because you're with this person, and it is weird how he keeps talking about like Linus Larrabee is lonely, and she's like, I'm not exactly sure what to do with this information. Like, it is weird how he's trying to, like, he's really laying it on thick, and he doesn't know how to necessarily seduce a woman.
Hmm. A lot of this is him not actually liking her. He's like trying to do things to make her like him because of this
Right.
business deal that they're working on. And like part of it, he's like straight up lying to her too.
Yeah.
Because that whole thing about that one building, he
Right.
says that they've donated it to the city as a halfway house, which you find out later is a total lie because he actually wants to do that now.
Right. I mean, it's hard to like Linus. It's hard to like him during these parts because he's lying, and that but at the same time, it's like, is he though? How much is
It's
he
it's kind of a
invested into this?
combination. He's like lying, but also not lying at the same time.
Yeah.
Like he is trying to make her fall in love with him for the business deal, but I think he is in a way, well, he is falling for her. He just doesn't really want to admit it.
Yeah.
The one thing that I thought was weird, and maybe this isn't weird in that part of the country, but they went on a picnic at night. And I thought that was super weird. Like, who goes on a picnic at night?
I mean, it's dinner. So it's like they got dinner. But yeah, it was interesting because he apparently like baked the clams himself.
Uh-huh.
So I
I just
mean,
thought
this was a marathon date, I gotta say. Like, where did they get the clams? Did he buy them or did he fish them out? I'm assuming that he bought them and then just decided to like maybe put them over the fire. I don't know. I did like the different names that she referred to him, while they were on their little dinner date, because it really did show how he was like, "Ah, crap, this is really who I am."
like saying that she heard that he was called the only living heart donor.
Right. And how he thinks, scruples are actually a Russian
Russian currency.
currency.
Yeah, so then the next day is when you find out that he was lying because he's talking to the secretary and he's wanting to donate that brick building to the town. Because apparently he wasn't lying about owning it, but he was lying about donating it. And he also wants to get tickets to a show to take her on another date. And she comes to visit and brings all the photos that she took. And she's mixed up the envelopes of photos. So he's looking at her Paris photos. And I think that's what gets them starting to talk about going to Paris. Because he says that he's been wanting to go somewhere and get a real change. And he's thinking about Paris. He's kind of planting the seeds for this plan. But at the same time, I think he does kind of want to go to Paris.
Yeah. First off, can we talk about how much I love his secretary? She's
yes.
Probably one of my favorite auxiliary characters in this movie.
that one scene where it's not this same, but like the next time that Sabrina comes to the building, she's like, "Oh no, don't tell him I'm here." But he pays me to tell him. Like,
I'm just such a fan of her. And then, at the very end when he's like, you went to my apartment? And the mom's like, "I took her." He's like, "Oh yes, we had our arms elbow deep in your underwear. It was like touching the Shroud of Turin." I was like, "Oh my gosh, I love you."
She was great.
See, yeah, you gotta have somebody like that on your staff. Like, that's fantastic.
Uh-huh. Yeah, her character in the original one wasn't quite that funny.
No, and that was an upgrade for me.
Yes. So I don't think they actually go to the show that he was talking about getting tickets for. They end up going to an Indian restaurant instead.
Uh-huh.
And she wants him to eat with his hands. I think that's like authentic to Indians. Like I think they use flatbread to scoop the food. So
yeah.
the whole point of that was to make him feel very awkward, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I've had roommates who were from India, and one roommate who she was teaching me how to eat, rice and eat naan bread and all of their, curry different foods that they have. And you do have to eat it with your hands. And it was odd to get used to that. So I can definitely see, this was one of those moments where they definitely use it to their advantage to, make Harrison Ford looks as goofy as possible.
He had some line in there, something about like, it was a great method. Next time he'll try the soup.
Oh. Oh, I do like, he's like, "Oh, you don't mind eating with your hands, do you?" He's like, "Not since I made my hefty donation to the burn unit." And
There's a lot of great lines in this.
Oh, this is good. This is good.
So their dinner is where they're talking more about Paris, and by the end, I think he's basically admitting that he wants her, partly for this plan that he has, but I think he actually does like her at this point.
Yeah, and I saw an interview, as I mentioned, with Harrison Ford, and he talked about how it's not necessarily because he is trying to manipulate her and he's trying to get this plan, but in doing so, he's never really tried to dive into the "I love you" type feelings because he's never had to use this as a ploy. He doesn't know himself what is real and what isn't. And so he is, by putting that out there at all, he's like, is this real? Okay, I guess. And so he starts being seduced himself by the feelings themselves, that by putting them out there at all. And so, like, in that way, I do kind of worry about the whole, is this a real thing or not? Just because you are in love with being in love right now, like, is that what you are? But she really wasn't totally blown away by him, but really, like, she was. And I felt like that was weird. Like, I guess just putting it in, if I were in that situation, like, would I don't know, be able to see through it or anything like that? It's just kind of like, this is kind of odd. Like, I didn't even like you to begin with. Oh, thank you. No, I mean, well, and he keeps saying, like, she's like, I barely even know you. And he's like, well, actually, you know me better than anyone. I'm like, really? Does she? Does she, though?
I think he's saying that because of all the things that he sort of confided in her over the past couple of days. Because I get
That's
the
true.
sense that he's never said any of that kind of stuff to anyone before.
Yeah.
So I think that's what he means.
Ah, yes, because he talks to his mom. He says, "Ah, yes, we have bonded, we have confided in each other, told each other our secrets, as though it's like his task list. Like, okay, in order, this is the part of the task. This is how you do it. But yeah, he's never actually done it. So therefore, the act of doing it is like, wait, I actually just did this. I wasn't lying when I was telling her these things. Therefore." Oh, great. I fell for my own ploy.
So after this night, they go home, and David is there. His drugs have worn off, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And he's wanting to pick up where they left off, go back to the solarium. And she basically just tells him, no, we'll do it tomorrow. You go rest now. So I don't know how much of that is her wanting to delay things because she maybe feels something for Linus now. I think that might be playing into this. She's trying to figure out how she feels, and she wants to delay David at this point.
Yeah, I think that's probably what's happening.
So then the next day, this is where the Paris trip thing starts falling into place because Linus is telling the secretary to get 2 tickets for them to go to Paris. And you also have the Tysons showing up at this point without Elizabeth, just the parents. And they're almost basically threatening him, saying that they've gotten this other offer. They're not going to accept it this time because they're almost family. But they think that David's behavior has been suspicious, and they're wondering how serious he is about Elizabeth. And the mother is just basically trying to say, oh, he's on a whole bunch of drugs. You gotta take what he says with a grain of salt.
I mean, that is true. They did put him on quite a few drugs.
Yes, that is true. It gave them a good excuse. So then, after this whole meeting, Linus takes his mother to the other room and tells her everything. Tells her about the whole plan. He's taking her to Paris. He's going to leave her there, and then they'll close the deal after that. And the mother is like, she's worrying about Sabrina. And he basically says, this is business. Apparently, you've never seen someone's face after they've taken over their business. And you taught me everything I know. And she says, I didn't teach you this. So she's worrying more about Sabrina than you kind of expected her to, because she seems kind of not heartless at the beginning, but like she's more in the business, and maybe you don't think she might care that much, but she does now. She likes Sabrina, and she doesn't want her to get hurt.
I think there's also a level of respect for her dad.
Yeah.
Because with families like this, and just really with anybody, it's like when you have respect, a working relationship with someone, you don't ever really want to close that. And especially with like family types, like they never were the ones that closed the windows. And so it's like they had a really good relationship with the dad, and saw her, to an extent grow up. Yeah, she wasn't necessarily somebody that they paid attention to growing up, but she was there, and they paid for the fact that she lived in their house, So I feel like it had more to do with just the length of time that they'd known this girl and her family versus necessarily herself, because I don't think that they were ever really like And I mean, I know later she goes in and is like, "Oh no, now you need to run away." But I feel like that mostly was where a lot of it came from, and then it's like I think after that, once they realize more of, or specifically once David tells the mom, how deep Linus is in, I think that she is a lot more on Sabrina as a person side. But that's
Hmm.
just my view, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So then, I think I mentioned before, this is where she comes to the office, and this is where she sees the secretary, and the secretary buzzes her in. Like, he pays me to tell him. And this is where he is inviting her to go to Paris, and she wants to tell David, and he doesn't want her to. And I think they're about to kiss, and the secretary interrupts them. I did knock.
I like her again.
Yes. And she delivers the tickets that he had her get. And Sabrina is now super happy, and everything changes for him. Like, he now feels the same way his mom does. He doesn't want to hurt her. He tells her everything, that she was getting in the way of David's marriage and their company's merger. He was planning to abandon her in Paris, but he had an apartment for her and a bank account with 500,000 francs. I don't know how much that translates to, but it's apparently a lot of money.
It's enough, I'm sure. She does say that his original offer of $1 million was more, so
Yeah, they were talking in hypotheticals earlier, like on one of
of
their
course.
dates.
Well, that was in the solarium.
Okay. But she says that she doesn't want it. However, she does take the ticket. So I don't know how much she was accepting. Was she accepting just the ticket, or was she going to take the money too?
She just took the ticket because she's like, "Oh no, I don't want any of it. Actually, but I will take this." And then her dad, that's later on where her dad was like, "Well, actually, I'll pay for stuff because I can."
Mm,
So,
yeah.
because daddy's got some monies. So she gets an apartment or something for her. But then so that's also why Linus didn't know where she would be and why he had to ask her dad, like, where is she?
Oh, yeah, you're right. I didn't think of that. You're right. Yep.
But I mean, it's nice to know that they both have an apartment here now at this point. So,
Yeah, yeah. They can maybe work on having a real relationship before moving on,
right.
instead of a fake or one-sided relationship.
Yeah, I still at this point, I'm like, I don't know how deep this is gonna stay, but we'll go with it. All right. I guess because Linus he's not one to make these types of advances, period. So
Hmm.
any type of advance is kind of him just making a decision and moving forward in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I hope it works out for them in this fictional world. I hope it works out for Sabrina and Linus.
Yeah. Well, I think the whole family can sense that they're good together, because you'll see that they kind of all work together to make it happen. Because you have, at this point, he's basically so remorseful that he's going to have David go after her like he planned in the original film. So he tells his secretary to transfer the ticket to David, and he's going to have David go after her. But she ends up going to see David too before she leaves. She doesn't tell him what happened, but she says, like, I won a ticket to Paris. He says one way, and she says yes, and he seems happy for her. So, like, he's moving on. Like, he's ready to settle down with Elizabeth.
Uh-huh.
So you have David going to see Linus and punching Linus when he admits everything. He tells him that he's been manipulating Sabrina, but David is the one Sabrina really wants. And at this point, when he leaves, he tells the secretary that he wants to talk to her. So you could tell something's going on. But he also asks to see her in his office, and he says, "Where is it?" Like, he has an office, but he doesn't know where it is.
Right. I love that. I need to speak to you. We're in my office.
Hmm.
Um, where is it?
And then he also meets with Elizabeth and basically tells her everything. And then I think it off screen, you don't see it happen, but everybody starts getting together except for the parents, Elizabeth's parents. And I think they're all formulating their own plan on how to get Linus to Paris with Sabrina.
Yeah.
And then this is where you have the whole scene with her saying goodbye to her dad, and he admits he's got $2 million. And then you have the whole thing with him and the other housekeeper or whatever she is, Joanna.
I think
And
she's the chef.
oh, okay. Yeah, you might be right. Yeah. So she's like, why didn't you tell any of us how to make all that money? He's like, well, you could marry me and get the money that way. She's like, she would never marry for money, but how about for love?
I thought that was cute.
Yeah, I thought that whole thing was cute. I like them together. So then you have the big meeting, same as the end of the original movie. The difference here is that everybody's kind of in on it. It's not a huge surprise for everybody. It's a surprise for Linus because he thinks that he's going to be telling everybody that David is leaving and not marrying Elizabeth. But it turns out during David's meeting with Elizabeth, they decided they're going to elope. And then their mother and the secretary have packed Linus's bag, and everybody's been working together to get him to Paris. And I think I wrote down this one quote from the mother to Linus. And she says, Linus, I love you. No mother could be prouder, but I think it's time you ran away from home. And then David pops in, but sign these first.
Right.
And that's the point where he basically takes over the meeting. And it turns out he's a lot smarter than people think he is. And there was a line earlier in the movie, too, about him going to business school but never showing up at the office. So he has the knowledge. He just has not used it up until this point.
Yeah, and he ends up really showing everybody like, okay, I can, or actually, no, going back slightly where Linus is like, he makes the comment of like, and I never quite understood why he just never showed up. Like as though he knew that he could, and he knew that he had it in him, but it was also like, I don't understand what is wrong with him. Like, why? And then later on, she's like, well, he said that why do they need me when they've got you? Yeah. And so you can see that he was just basically waiting for a chance to, quote unquote, prove himself without Linus being there.
Yeah. And that's another way that I feel like they've made his character better by making him not this flaky playboy. He's actually got some smarts and he's willing to do what he needs to.
Yeah.
And then after this, he's decided, yes, he's going to go to Paris, and he's actually being driven to the airport by Sabrina's dad. And they have a whole conversation. He says he doesn't deserve her, and they kind of agree to that, but he promises that he's going to take care of her anyway. And they end up stuck in traffic. It looked like they were both going to abandon the car, but I don't think they did. He ended up making a run for it to catch the airplane in time.
So the final moment where they're, face to face, and he's coming to basically say, you said I would love Paris. I hope you didn't think that I would ever do it without you, did you? And my question to you, did you feel like that was believable, that whole exchange?
Yes, but it was also awkward. Because of the way they left things, it feels weird that he would just kind of show up. Like, if I had left things on a bad note with someone and they followed me across the world and then just showed up, that would seem kind of stalkery. But I guess since this is fiction, it's okay. I don't know.
It's the movies. Let it be.
Yeah, it's romantic. It's not stalkery.
And I did like that they gave her the line of like, I don't know how I'm supposed to trust you. And then it's like, oh, but you know me better than anyone. I'm like, once again, still don't believe you. Yeah. Probably one more reason why I probably shouldn't trust you. But I don't know. I felt like they did it, the whole ending. I felt like, okay, I'll get behind this just because I feel like they worked enough for it. So I can get behind it enough too.
I think it's just one of those things where they're kind of limited by the fact that it's a movie and not a TV series. Because if it were a TV series, they could draw this out a little more and maybe make him call her and apologize and talk about things before following her across the world to Paris and showing up on her doorstep.
I do like that there is a point in time where she was like, well, you are formidable, aren't you? Like he's a guy that is not going to give up. So she's just like, well, I guess this is your thing. You're kind of like all in.
Yeah. It makes sense. And it's not like I'm creeped out by this or anything. It's just one of those things
Oh,
in
totally.
movies. So, yeah, I'm willing
Totally.
to forgive it more than if this were a thing that happened in real life.
Right, right.
One thing that I noticed that I just thought was kind of interesting, I don't think this was the case with the original film. It ends with the same narration from the beginning.
Yeah, I don't think that was in the original, but I kind of liked I kind of liked it.
hmm It was a nice way to, I guess, bookend the film, to call back to the beginning.
So what would you give this whole film out of 5 stars?
Maybe 3.5. My initial instinct is 4, but because it was good, but like, I don't know if that's being too generous or not. It's not 5-star worthy, but I don't know that it's like 3-star worthy. Three seems too low, so maybe 3.5.
I think I can get behind a 3.5 for me as well. It was definitely going to be between a 3 and a 4. So 3.5 is a good, line down the middle. I
Yeah.
think compared to the other one, I think I would give the other one, 3.75, maybe 4. Maybe I
Okay.
gave it a 4 before. Definitely not a 5, but it is enough levity to bring you back at least once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I still don't know which one I like better because there are things about both that I really like. And like I said, I liked it more this time around than last time, just because I think I got over the whole age gap thing. But the actors are really great in the old one. It's such a great look at that time. And I think a lot of that probably has to do with the clothes, like you said. And it's like an old Hollywood film. It just feels so,
Yeah.
I don't know if iconic is the right word. I don't like using that word too much, but like that's the first thing that pops into my head. It's one of those movies that just has that old Hollywood feel, and I like that about it. But I do like the script changes that they made to the new one. I like a few of the characters a little bit more, especially like the secretary. I like some of the quirky changes, the number of one-liners. So there's things to like about both. So I don't know if I have a preference one way or the other.
I agree. They had a lot of good things with both. Yeah, I still vote for the first one just because I feel like that's the more iconic of the two. But I do like a lot of the aspects of this one as well. So I think that this one, the fact that currently it's on Prime and, it's one of those movies that you can just add to a list of, romantic flicks, I would definitely put it on again just as we'll have that go on in the background if I want that going on.
Mm-hmm.
So all in all, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on this episode.
Yeah, I'm glad we did this one. It was a nice change of pace from some of the movies that I've been watching recently. I've done a few too many movies that are like super bad.
Oh no, don't do that to yourself.
I mean, it's partly for this podcast because it's every version ever. So I'm trying to watch as many versions of certain stories that I can. And at some point, you're going to run into some clunkers. But I do have someone who enjoys that kind of thing, and we always have great conversations. So even though movies are a chore to get through, it does result in a fun conversation. But it's still a nice change of pace to watch a movie like this that is actually a really good movie.
Good. I'm glad that I turned this on to you.
Yeah. Plus the fact that I watched both the original and then this one, so it was actually 2 good movies in a row after like 3 bad movies in a row.
I'm upping your average.
Yes. Okay, well, I think that'll be all for this episode. Do you want to let people know where they can find you if they want more from you?
Sure. If you want to take a look at any of my stuff, my name is Chelsea Robson. I am a singer, and I also do another podcast where we interview and talk about animated movies called the Rotoscopers Animation Addicts Podcast. But me personally, I am a songwriter. So I do a lot of songs for weddings, for anniversaries. So if you know anybody who is looking for that special gift for a romantic episode of their own, you can give me a call. You can go to songsbychelsea.com, and I love doing that. So it's been a lot of fun to be able to kind of dig into other people's love stories as well.
Okay, and I will have links to all that stuff in the description.
Perfect.
Well, thanks for joining me. Maybe someday in the future we'll have to find some other good movie to talk about and do another episode.
I'm all down for good movies.
Okay, well, we'll see you next time.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks to Chelsea for joining me for this episode. I'll have her links in the description below. Next time on Every Version Ever, we'll be doing another mini-series. I'll be joined by my friend Jenna, aka Phantomwise, aka the biggest Alice in Wonderland fan that I know. And over the course of 2 episodes, we're going to be talking about a huge variety of all sorts of obscure, short adaptations of Alice in Wonderland. And then if you want more from her, Jenna and I also talked for probably at least an hour on all sorts of random topics, from favorite movies and TV to her love of Alice in Wonderland, and that interview will be going up on iHeartMovies. So we'll see you next time on both podcasts. Thanks for listening.